Hello, everyone. In this short PowerPoint, I just wanted to summarize what we've learned so far from Julius Caesar, Acts 1, 2, and 3. The reason I wanted to highlight and summarize some key points in each of these acts is because this will help us prepare for our leadership debate on Julius Caesar. It will also help us to prepare to finish our character analysis papers. So in Act 1, this is when we meet the famous leader Caesar, of course, and then we get introduced to other major characters. Now, in the very first act, remember, we are in the center of Rome, and we've got the two tribunes, Flavius and Marullus, and they're very upset with the citizens. Why are they upset? Because the citizens seem to be very, very happy, very cheerful, and supposedly they are getting ready for the festival of Lupercal. We know the tribunes, on the other hand, are very upset because they know that the celebration is more because Caesar's coming back to Rome. So this is their frustration. They eventually get the citizens to go home, or try to rather, and then they go about pulling down all the decorations from all of the statues of Caesar throughout the streets. Now, the next thing that happens in scene 2, the scene 2 is when everybody comes to town. These are all the celebrities of ancient Rome. So we have Caesar and his wife Calpurnia, we have Brutus and his wife Portia, of course the general Mark Antony, and then Cassius, Casca, and Decius, in addition to other characters who are now come back to Rome. So they, because it's the Feast of Lupercal, get ready for some celebrations, or as they like to do in ancient Rome, have some games. So the person that's going to be presenting for the Caesar, of course, is Mark Antony. So what Caesar says to Mark Antony is, please, Mark Antony, as you are running or racing, please touch Calpurnia. And because the reason he wants him to touch Calpurnia, of course, is because he feels in ancient Rome there's a superstition that if you touch during these games or touch someone who's infertile, that they will likely have a baby. So that comes to Act 2. Of course, as they go down to the stadium to get ready for the games, there are two people that hold back. Now, who are those two people? Of course, the two people are Brutus and Mr. Cassius. And so the conversation that happens to these two people as they hold back is the conversation where Cassius is trying to turn Brutus against Caesar. Okay? Just remember that while they're having this private conversation, they hear cheering from the stadium 3 times. And so they're a little bit anxious about this cheering. They want to know what is going on in the stadium at the games with all this cheering from the citizens. So what happens is eventually everybody comes back from where the games were being celebrated. Cassius and Brutus want to pull aside Casca, one of the senators, because they feel that Casca will be able to tell them what all the cheering is about. And of course, Casca then proceeds to tell them that the cheering was because Mark Antony, possibly taking a laurel from his head that he had been awarded with because he was an athlete, and trying to put it as a symbolic gesture of a crown onto Caesar's head to crown him as king. And we know that all 3 times Caesar turned it down. But the reason everybody does not look so happy as they return from the stadium is because we know by the 3rd time when Caesar tried to refuse the crown, he actually fell and fainted. And so this is where we get an awareness of possibly Caesar's second physical weakness. Not only is he unable to have children, he also potentially has epilepsy. Okay? So the other thing that happens also is the other 2 people that have a private conversation are Caesar and Mark Antony. Caesar draws Mark Antony to him, and he says to Mark Antony, as he's pointing to Cassius, I do not like people who are thin or who are too skinny. And it's a metaphor because what he and then he goes on to say, surround me with people, men who are fat. But he doesn't really mean skinny in the sense as physically skinny. He says there's a hungry look inside Cassius, and it's that look that makes him a thin person, or a person that is someone that is dangerous. Okay? Then we come to Act 3. Finally, Act 3 is where all the omens happen, and this is outside on the streets of Rome. What were the 5 omens that are being seen by Cicero and Casca? What are they? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, very good. The very first omen was the storm that was dropping fire from the sky. And remember, omen means something bad is going to happen. It's like a foreshadowing of something that's bad that is going to happen. The second omen was a common slave holding up his arm, and even though the arm was on fire, the arm did not burn. The third omen was a lion who was right in front of the Capitol, and this lion just looked at them and just walked away. So this was, again, a very strange thing, and this was omen number 3. Omen number 4, 100 terrified women paralyzed with fear because they saw men all made of fire walking up and down the streets. Then that brings us finally to the last omen, and we know the last omen to be an owl. What was the owl doing? And the owl did something very strange, because it's something that owls don't normally do during the day. The owl was screeching in the marketplace at midday. So these are all the strange things that are happening. There's a discussion with Cicero and Casca about these things. Then along comes Cassius. And of course, as these omens are being explained to Cassius, what does Cassius say? Cassius turns everything around, and he says the omens are actually telling us to be afraid of Caesar. Okay, so this is what brings us finally to the end of Act 1. The only other thing you need to remember is that Cassius starts his plotting, and this is when he makes the plot to make the false letters that will be used to turn Brutus against Caesar. In these letters, there will be information to say that Caesar is a bad person, and supposedly these letters were anonymous letters, but sent to Brutus by citizens of Rome. So there is a lot that happens also in Act 2. Act 2 primarily takes place at Brutus's home. This is where the conspirators meet to plan what they are going to do, how they are going to do to get Caesar to the Capitol in order to carry out the assassination. Remember, at the beginning of this particular act, we are at Brutus's house, and he's having an internal conflict about what he should do. Should he turn against the person who's been like a mentor to him, or should he stay loyal to Caesar? But then the conspirators come, they knock at his house, and everybody shows up, and they start to plan the assassination. One question is from Decius. Decius says, so we have this assassination, we're plotting, and we definitely will be killing Caesar. What about Mark Antony? Isn't he a threat as well? And of course, Cassius agrees with him. But this is where Brutus draws the line. Brutus actually says, let us be sacrificers and not butchers. So what he's saying is, yes, we are going to get rid of the person who's a threat, but we're not going to go ahead and start just killing everyone. Okay, so that's how he responds to that. And then the next scene is we are at Caesar's house, and it's between Caesar and Calpurnia. And in this particular scene, Calpurnia's had some really bad dreams, and Caesar has not been able to sleep. Calpurnia was crying out, and she was saying that a lioness gave birth in the streets, graves opened, and not only that, she says that she saw a statue of Caesar, and it was pouring in blood, and people were washing their hands in the blood. So of course, to her, these are all bad omens. So she's very wary of Caesar going to the Senate that morning. So along comes Decius, of course. Decius and everybody shows up at Caesar's house, and Decius convinces Caesar that these dreams of Calpurnia don't mean anything bad. They actually mean that you will be given the crown. So he turns everything around. And of course, because Caesar is a person who's a bit arrogant and he can be prideful, he takes this information and he immediately agrees with him and turns away from his wife and does not heed the warnings from Calpurnia. Okay, so they have some wine and they proceed to go to the Capitol by the end of Act 2. So at the beginning of Act 3, we have approached, all of the major characters in this particular act are now approaching the Senate. And so this would be Caesar being accompanied by the senators who had come to his house that morning to bring him to the Capitol. And so along with Brutus, Cassius, and these other senators, there is also Mark Antony with this, all there to greet Caesar. And we know that what he plans to do is he's preparing for another campaign, another war campaign. But he has some Senate business. He has some business he has to take care of. Now, while he is walking into the Senate or the Capitol, there's that old man called Artemidorus. And Artemidorus has some very important news or a warning and a letter that he wants to get to Caesar. But Decius knows about this, and Decius blocks him so that this old man is unable to get this letter to Caesar. Now, we know that the letter contains all the names of the conspirators. So this old man is blocked from getting the letter to Caesar. The next thing that happens is, so there's some Senate business, but then Trebonius, as the assassins are getting ready for the actual assassination, he takes Mark Antony outside. He takes him somewhere so that Mark Antony is not there when they actually start to kill Caesar. So the first person to stab Caesar is Casca, and then all 60 of these senators actually proceed to try to kill Caesar, and actually 23 stab wounds actually get through to Caesar's body. So he does fight these men. However, when the very last person to come and kill him, which we know, of course, is Brutus, when Brutus comes to stab him, initially Caesar's happy. It's like, oh, wow, Brutus is going to save me. When he sees the knife and he realizes that Brutus is actually going to kill him, this, of course, is when Caesar gives up. And this is when Caesar says those famous words, et tu, Brute. So he's like, and we know it's like, you too, Brutus, and it's also meaning, you too, my son. And that's when the old man basically gives up and he dies. Okay, and that's the key information in this particular scene, because we know what happens after that is that there are the civil wars. We have his funeral, and then there are the civil wars between Mark Antony and Caesar's nephew, who's also another military leader, Octavius, and they lead armies against Cassius and against Brutus. And we know eventually that Octavius and Mark Antony win, and they then rule Rome for a short time along with Mr. Lepidus. Okay, that brings us to the end so far. So I hope you were able to take that summary of the major events and major characters from Act 1 through all the scenes in Act 1 all the way to the very last Act 3. And please forgive me because I was interchanging the word scene and the word act, but that's fine. You generally know the story just as well as I do because you've been annotating along as we have been studying this play in our class. So as you watch this, go back and annotate your notes again, highlight anything, and make sure you have a really good sense of everything that's happened in our play from the very beginning to the end of Act 3. Now, the other thing I do need to remind you is that the one memorization from our play is Mark Antony's speech, and there it is right there, starting with the first line, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears," and it ends with the line, "So are they all honorable men." Now remember, at Caesar's funeral, this is before the civil wars break out, Brutus gives a speech, but the person that gives the last speech is Mark Antony. And it is Mark Antony's speech that gets the citizens of Rome to back up the armies that fight against the senators who had committed the assassination. Okay, so thank you. That's the end.